The sixth generation of game consoles birthed and expanded upon so many great IPs, many of which would go on to become titans of gaming, while others came and went, only to be forgotten by time. But right there in the center are all the hidden gems. These are games that didn't gain that critical acclaim, but were still absolutely loved by those who played them. Today we're looking at one of said games. Does anyone remember Freedom Fighters? Freedom Fighters was released in 2003 and developed by IO Interactive. For the uninitiated, IO are the folks behind all the Hitman games, along with the two Kane and Lynch games and a game called Mini Ninjas. So it's impressive, they managed to squeeze this game out between Hitman 2 and Hitman contracts. So, what's the story? Well, during World War II, the Soviets nuke Berlin, establishing them as a superpower and ending the war. After this, they start establishing communist states around the globe, eventually surrounding the US. Cut to 2003, where you and your brother, just two humble plumbers, are on your way to a job when the Soviet Union launches a full-scale attack on New York. You then set out to save your brother and in turn wipe out the Red Threat. That may seem bare bones, but that's basically it. Freedom Fighters is Red Dawn the game. It's what Homefront wished it could be. I think what makes Freedom Fighters stand out over other games of similar setting is the fact that the game doesn't make you out to be a one-man army. Instead, the central gameplay loop relies heavily on your merry band of fighters. You have to gain charisma levels in order to lead more troops into the fray. At the start of the game, you'll only be able to lead 2, but by the end of the game, you'll be leading 12. Speaking of not being a one-man army, you can and will die a lot. Maybe games have become soft over time, but damn, this game's difficult. It doesn't give a single shit about you or your feelings, it'll kill you in any way it sees fit. This is the single most frustrating aspect of the game, but it's also what makes it so good. See, alone, you're weak as shit, like a marshmallow. It doesn't take a lot to empty your health bar, but together with your squad, you feel like the Scorpion King's army from the start of The Mummy Returns. By making you weak, the game requires you to use your squad and keep them alive. This adds a lot of depth to what would have otherwise been a pretty generic third-person shooter. This also serves as a visual for you to see the resistance grow through your actions, in real time, not just when you go to a safe zone. And these things are all complemented by the gunplay. I mean, the weapons on offer here aren't anything to write home about. In fact, I'd go a step further and say the selection here is pretty boring and uninspired, but they get the job done. You have the pistol and revolver, which are basically only good in the beginning of the game or as the last resort in a heated gunfight. The pistol does less damage than a Nerf gun, and the revolver is only slightly better. Then, there's the AK. It's pretty decent, but it still feels weak, and the reload time is quite long. The upside, ammo is everywhere. The Bison is this game's SMG, and it's quite strong, but its blazing fast fire rate means you'll burn through ammo faster than your mom burns through your college fund at the casino. On top of that, ammo for it is scarce as only a few enemy types carry it. The SPAS 12 is the same as every other video game shotgun from this era, and I'll say the same thing I always do. It's amazing until the enemy is out of arm's reach. This, paired with its extreme pellet spread and long reload time, make it a weapon you're better off avoiding. Unless of course you're out of ammo and it's the only option around. Even in close quarters, the shotgun didn't feel any more powerful than an AK would. The sniper rifle is very situational. Luckily, you'll only really find it in places that make sense, like a rooftop or a tower. One shot to the dome with the sniper is more than enough to kill every enemy in the game, aside from the heavy MG guys of course. Second to last is the heavy MG, and this gun is an absolute powerhouse, able to wipe an entire group of enemies with ease. Earlier on in the game it's extremely rare, but anytime you see it, grab it and go to town. Later on, you'll go up against an increasing number of heavy MG guys who naturally carry this thing. Finally, there's the RPG, and like the sniper rifle, it's situational and doesn't have a lot of ammo, but you'll only ever find one when you need to take out a tank or a helicopter. If I could summarize all the guns and place them under one umbrella, I'd say that aside from the heavy MG, I very often felt like I should have been dealing more damage than I actually was. I feel like this is mostly due to the inaccuracy of the weapons. However, the real standouts, the MVPs, are the grenade and Molotov. These two are the greatest tools you have in your arsenal. The grenade blows shit up and sends them baddies soaring through the air in what are possibly the greatest video game ragdolls I have ever seen. I mean, this makes sense when you remember that IO Interactive also made the Hitman games, which also have some amazing ragdolls. On many occasions, I was able to clear out entire checkpoints with a single grenade, but the Molotovs are the real chef's kiss. The workhorse of any uprising. They spread and splash fire everywhere. Soldiers can even spread fire between one another if they're close enough. There are a few important things this game does that make throwables so great, and these are ease of use, generosity, and stun capabilities. Throwables are idiot-proof in Freedom Fighters. You have a reticle and a power bar, and honestly that's all you really need. About an hour into the game, you'll be lobbing these things with such accuracy it'll finally be enough to make your father proud. And the game is so incredibly generous with them too. I mean, they're everywhere, so you'll almost always have a full backpack. Lastly, Molotovs cause enemies to writhe around in pain, essentially stunning them until they die. A great strategy is to throw a Molotov into a group of enemies, and while they're dealing with that, you send your squad in to clean house. Strategies like this are almost a necessity on Governor's Island, but more on that hellscape later. Freedom Fighters has 8 different levels for you to liberate, each of which are broken up into multiple different sub-areas. Certain objectives in certain areas need to be completed first. Now this is important, because if you're like me and just toss this little nugget of information to the wind, you'll end up beating your head against a wall for half an hour in one area, when you're supposed to be tackling an entirely different area first. In the first level, if you wander into the wrong area, there will be a dude standing at the entrance who tells you that you need to go elsewhere to get C4.
Wanna blow that gas station? You're gonna need some explosives. You can find some in the other neighborhood.
But after that, the game doesn't really convey this to you again. Maybe I just got lucky and chose the correct starting area through most of my playthrough, but I sure as shit didn't on Governor's Island. What I really like about the levels is that even though the whole game takes place in New York City, they all seem to feel just different enough to not get repetitive. I mean, you're fighting on the streets, in factories, on the shoreline, through sewers, back alleys, shops. There's even a level where you have to fight your way up the interior of a tall building, shooting through the lobby all the way up to the offices above. I feel like they really nailed level variety and diversity here. But what about enemy variety? Well, there are 7 or 8 different enemy types you'll come across, the most common of which being the pistol and AK grunts. They're your basic run-of-the-mill soldiers. Right above them are the shotgunners. They're more tanky than the first 2, and as the name implies, they carry the SPAS 12. Then there are 2 variants of SMG enemies. One looks almost identical to the shotgunner, while the other is a woman dressed in all black that does all kinds of acrobatics around the battlefield. Lastly, there are the sniper, who does, sniper things, and the heavy MG guy, a huge behemoth with thick armor and a massive gun.
That's what she said.
And that pretty well covers all the enemy variants, but what about allied variants? Well, they're more or less the same and can be found holding pistols, shotguns, SMGs, or AKs. Unfortunately, there are no sniper or heavy MG recruits, and pistol recruits are basically useless, so later on in the game it's better to not even recruit them, although they do make good cannon fodder. Earlier, I touched on the overwhelming importance of your squad, and to be honest, the AI in Freedom Fighters is for the most part pretty solid. I mean, sometimes they're dumb as shit and run into the open when you've told them not to, start shooting at enemies when you're waiting for the right moment, or they'll take cover on the wrong side of an object. Other than a handful of issues like that, the AI worked well throughout my entire playthrough, which is refreshing because a lot of other games of that era had AI that would just stop dead in their tracks and shoot at you. Here, they sneak around, take cover, man turrets, and throw grenades. The final level is a hellscape known as Governor's Island, and for me it's the most stressful part of the game. The game doesn't really give you any direction or recommended order in which to tackle your objectives either, so I was left to do a lot of trial and error. I eventually figured that going for the C4 would probably be my best option, but that just raised its own host of challenges. First off, you're alone during this portion, and I tell ya, I died so many times trying to get that damn C4, it no joke took me 37 minutes and about a dozen deaths. I was pretty low on ammo, and the game throws 4 heavy MG dudes at you in this area alone. Your best option is to cheese Molotovs, and after all that time, I got the C4. Next, the ventilation shaft. This portion isn't all that hard. Once you blow the shaft, freedom fighters will enter the level. Earlier, I talked about the levels and how they're structured. Same applies to the island. But, as I said earlier, my dumbass just threw this knowledge out the window. I tried to complete the docks area with my squad, only I kept dying to that damn attack chopper. It's an almost insta-kill and must have killed me 7 or 8 times before I just gave up and went to a different area. Cause fuck that chopper, that's why. I then realized I should probably take out the attack chopper helipad. No one told me, how about a fucking tooltip or some bullshit? But honestly, it makes too much sense, and I should have known by now. But even with a full squad, it's still a very difficult level. You have to remember all the things you've been taught about squad tactics in the AI, or you'll just end up wasting time in medkits, which are very valuable in this level. You can lose half a health bar in a fraction of a second. I constantly had to make good use of the tried and true strategy of hiding in a trench, lobbing nades out indiscriminately. Is this a bitch move? Yes, but I died on most of these levels 5 or 6 times, so by the time I actually finished them, I was stressed and impatient. One thing that did disappoint me was the fact that there's no endgame boss battle. Now I understand that a typical boss fight wouldn't work in the context of this game, but I was at least hoping for some kind of defense portion at the end. Like after finally reaching your max squad size, you have to set up a perimeter and defend the fort against the last of the communist soldiers. But unfortunately, once you raise that last flag, the game just ends. See how abrupt that is? And after all that, you're treated to the weirdest end cutscene ever. In it, Chris, Mr. Badass Freedom Phantom, is just sitting there alone, sulking on the beach like a little bitch. I'd understand if he were sad about his brother's death or something, but it seems that even Chris has forgotten all about... what's his name? Troy. He forgot all about Troy. There's no mention of him anywhere in this scene. But what I really don't get is the fact that this game did not set Chris up to be this emotional. As a matter of fact, it hardly set Chris up at all. Throughout the game, he's just a stone cold killer with basically zero character development. Only for the last scene is he like this. So, Isabella comes over and basically throws herself at Chris, but then he tells her to leave. Then hugs her, and then walks away with her. I'm so confused, like what the fuck did I just wait, did he just look at the camera? He did! Jeez, those are some cold dead eyes. I didn't realize this was a horror game. So, if you played this game back in the day, there's a good chance you would have tried the multiplayer portion. I don't usually touch on multiplayer in these videos, but in Freedom Fighters, it's too great not to. It was ahead of its time, and I like to think of it as an early MOBA. Here's how it works. There are 4 outposts per map, along with a central flag. Each player must capture outposts in order to get a squad of up to 8 AI. And holy shit, when your squads clash, it becomes scorched earth. Bullets flying everywhere, AI dropping left and right, bodies flying, AI burning. It's total unadulterated anarchy, and a fucking blast. But I'm getting sidetracked. The objective is a flag in the center of the map. Both players have to fight for control of said flag. First one to hold it for X amount of time wins. Games can be quick steamroll victories, or they can be hour-long slugfests. You could sacrifice flag time in order to flank around and capture enemy outposts, basically cutting off the other player's reinforcements. There's quite a lot of strategy involved for how simple it is. And that's what made it so great. The multiplayer alone was what I remember so fondly about this game. And better yet, it's still as fun as I remember. Not surprisingly, Freedom Fighters was received pretty positively, garnering an average rating of about 80%. Most praise was on the AI and the soundtrack. I agree with this, both were pretty good. Some criticisms are that the enemy AI is lacking and that the game was too short. And I see their point, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. I only have a handful of gripes with this game. There are so many times where I'd just get insta-killed. And as I said at the outset of this video, it's both good and bad. But that doesn't mean it didn't piss me off. Another is the half-baked stealth mechanic. It doesn't really seem to work consistently. That, and the level structure and enemy layout encourage confrontation. I'm not complaining. If I want to play a stealth game, I'll just boot up Metal Gear Solid. My last complaint is that when you have items that are placed on a waist-high surface, you have to jump up or mantle to acquire the item. For example, see these 2 medkits? I need them, so I walk up to the table and I don't take them. My inventory isn't full either, so what's the deal? What I have to do is climb up onto the table where the ceiling is at its peak so I can fit, then I have to awkwardly shimmy close enough for the game to suck them into my ass. Again, not a huge issue, but after 5 hours it really gets to ya. This is another one of those rare games that are actually as good as I remember. I absolutely love how it took the third-person shooter formula and added a few more layers to keep it fresh. Is it a perfect game? No, far from it, but hot damn is it ever fun. Watching your squad wash over a checkpoint, man a turret, then start blasting away at soldiers running up the street was always awesome. I also really like how as the game progresses, the seasons change. It really does a great job at showing the player the passing of time. But what about you guys? Do you remember Freedom Fighters? If so, let me know in the comments below. Hell, even if you don't, fire off a comment anyway. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching my video. I appreciate you immensely. Don't forget to like the video, and if I've earned your subscription, that would also be greatly appreciated. And have a wonderful day.